Paul hires a financial advisor who charges 1% a year. Rachel opens an app on her phone and buys a single index fund. They both start with $50,000. They both think they made the smarter choice. And they're both about to find out that the difference between them isn't 1%. It's $131,000. Let's keep this fair. Paul and Rachel are both 35. They both earn $80,000 a year. Same $50,000. Same market. Same 7% a year before costs. Neither adds another dollar. Neither panics in a crash. Neither makes a single bad decision for 30 years. The only difference between these two people is who they pay. Paul's advisor sits with him for 90 minutes and asks about his kids, his mortgage, when he wants to stop working. 2 weeks later, Paul gets a bound plan, 40 pages, his name on the cover. Quarterly calls. A real human being who picks up the phone. The fee is 1% of whatever Paul has invested, charged every year, automatically, out of the account itself. Paul never writes a check. He never sees a bill. Rachel buys a total market index fund in about 90 seconds. Her expense ratio is 0.03%. Nobody calls her. On day one, Paul feels like an adult who finally has his life handled. He tells people he's working with someone now. Rachel says she bought an index fund, and the conversation moves on. It isn't close in terms of how it feels, but feeling taken care of and being charged for it are two different things. Here's the sentence Paul's advisor said, and the sentence Paul repeated to his wife that night. It's only 1%. 4 words. It is, without exaggeration, the most successful sentence in the entire financial industry, because it's technically true and it sounds like nothing. 1% sounds like a rounding error. So let's stop talking in percentages, and let's run the actual math in dollars. There's one thing Paul doesn't know yet. His advisor doesn't just charge 1%. The funds his advisor picked charge about 0.5% on top of that. Rachel's fund charges 3/100ths. Paul is paying roughly 17 times more just for the products, before the advisor's fee even shows up. His real drag isn't 1% a year. It's about 1.5. End of year 1. Rachel has $53,500. Paul has $52,750. The difference is $750. $750. That's a weekend trip. If Paul had gotten a bill in the mail for that, he'd have shrugged and paid it, and he would have been right to. End of year 2, the gap is $1,594. Still invisible. And this is the part almost nobody explains before you sign. A percentage fee does not hurt at the beginning. It is structurally designed not to. Year 5. Rachel is at $70,128. Paul is at $65,348. The gap is $4,780. Paul still doesn't notice, and here's why. He isn't comparing himself to Rachel. He's comparing his account to what it was last year, and last year it was smaller. The number keeps going up. His advisor says things are on track, and they genuinely are. Nothing is broken. Nobody is stealing from Paul. Year 10. Rachel is at $98,358. Paul is at $85,407. The gap is now $12,950. That's a car. And it's the exact moment Paul would start asking questions, if he could see both accounts side by side. But nobody ever sees both accounts side by side. That's the whole problem. Year 20. Rachel has $193,484. Paul has $145,888. The gap is $47,596. Now look at what actually happened, because this is the entire point of this video. In year 1, the gap was $750. In year 20, it's $47,600. 63 times bigger. And the fee never changed. Not once. It was 1% in year 1 and 1% in year 20. What changed is that 1% was charged on a bigger number every year. And every dollar it took was a dollar that never got to compound for the years that were left. Paul isn't paying for advice. He's paying for advice plus everything that money would have become. Year 30, both of them are 65. Both of them are done. Rachel's $50,000 became $380,613. Paul's $50,000 became $249,198. The gap is $131,415. More than 2.5 times what either of them started with. Paul did not lose that in a crash. He didn't lose it on a bad pick or a scam. He paid it, 0.5% at a time, in amounts so small that not once in 30 years did he look at one and flinch. Now, if I stopped the story here, I'd be doing exactly what every index fund influencer on this platform does. So let's finish the math, category by category. Then I'll make the case for the other side, because there is a real one. The advisory fee. 1% of everything you have, every year, whether the market went up 30%, down 30%, or nowhere at all. It is not a fee for performance. It's a fee for having a balance. The fund layer. Most advisors don't put you in 3 basis point index funds. They build portfolios from actively managed funds that cost 10 to 20 times more. That layer sits quietly underneath the advisory fee, and it almost never comes up in the same conversation. Cash drag. Money held in cash, sometimes for years, waiting for a better entry point that statistically almost never arrives. You are paying 1% a year on money that isn't invested in anything. Tax drag. Rebalancing inside a taxable account creates capital gains events. Some of it is necessary, some of it exists so the quarterly review has something to show you. And the one nobody mentions. The fee comes straight out of the account. Paul never writes a check, never gets an invoice, never sees a line item. Over 30 years he paid about $131,000 for something he was never once asked to consciously approve the price of. None of this shows up on the 40-page plan with his name on the cover. All of it shows up on the final balance. So here's the other side, and it's genuinely strong. Vanguard has published research on this exact question for over a decade. Their estimate is that a good advisor adds around 3% a year in net value. That's 3 times what they typically charge. And the single largest piece of it isn't picking better investments. It's behavioral coaching. Roughly 1.5 percentage points that comes from one thing: stopping you from selling. Think about March of 2020. The market fell 34% in about a month. Millions of people sold, and many didn't get back in until it had already recovered. That one decision cost decades. Rachel's version of this story only works because Rachel never panicked. In the version where Rachel sells everything in the crash and sits in cash for 18 months, Paul wins. And it isn't close. So when does the advisor genuinely win? If you have ever actually panic sold, not thought about it, done it, with real money, then an advisor isn't a cost. An advisor is cheaper than your own hands. If your situation is genuinely complicated, you own a business, you have equity compensation, you just inherited something, this is not index fund territory. And if you're within 10 years of retirement, the case is strongest. Building wealth is simple. Spending it down is not. Which account to draw from first? When to claim Social Security? How to convert to a Roth without jumping a tax bracket? Getting that sequence right is worth far more than 1%. But notice something about every one of those. Not one requires paying a percentage of your entire net worth, forever. There are advisors who charge a flat annual fee, advisors who charge by the hour, advice-only planners who build the plan, hand it to you, and never touch your money. Same expertise, priced like a service instead of a subscription to your own savings. And that's the part that should actually bother you. 1% of $50,000 is $500 a year. 1% of $2 million is $20,000 a year. Same advisor, same phone calls, same rebalancing, same 40-page plan. The work does not scale with your balance. The fee does. You're not being charged for the advice you get. You're being charged for the money you have. Paul and Rachel both walked in thinking they'd made the smart move. Paul thought he was buying expertise. Rachel thought she was buying simplicity. Neither ever asked what the price was, in dollars, out loud. The real trap isn't hiring an advisor, and it isn't going it alone. The real trap is agreeing to a percentage without ever converting it into a number. So the next time someone tells you it's only 1%, ask them one question. 1% of what? For how many years? And what is that in dollars? Because that's the only version of the number that ever mattered.